Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I am delighted to be peering into the creative space of Gideon Kendall. Gideon, thank you for jumping in and joining.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
A pleasure, absolutely. And one of the things that I love about getting to do this project is that often an artist or an author that I have on will mention someone else that I can go and check out. And so that was the case here. I had Rick Parker on for a forthcoming interview, and he mentioned you, and I thought I should check this person out. So I know that you have a book called What's It? That is out there, MegaGhost on the way, and then also Marley's Ghost. Any other titles that we should be sure to mention here for listeners?
Well, one of the things I'm working on that's out now, I just finished up the last issue, is a miniseries for Dark Horse that's written by Eric Powell, and it's called Lester of the Lesser Gods. So that's out. That's out now. It's actually written by Eric Powell and Lucky Yates, who people might know. He's a voice actor on Archer, which is a show that a lot of people really dig.
Yeah, yeah.
Working with them was super awesome. I mean, working with Eric Powell is a huge thrill, and I owe Eric Powell a lot. I mean, he's the one who initially published MegaGhost, and when he brought his publishing company over to Dark Horse, now his publishing company is an imprint of Dark Horse now. He coerced them into bringing MegaGhost along. So
Nice.
yeah, so Eric is awesome. And in addition to being one of the best comic book artists around, he's also a really good writer. Because he's an artist, he knows how to write for comics really well.
Hmm.
So drawing Lester of the Lesser Gods has been just a total blast. It's the most hilarious, ridiculous, crazy book. Definitely not kid friendly, but really fun to work on. You know, I enjoy having a balance of stuff that is maybe a little bit some stuff that's a little bit more wholesome, and then some stuff that's a little more wild and crazy. And so yeah, I mean, I guess you mentioned the other books that are either out or going to be out
Hmm.
soon. So yeah, that's a pretty good overview right there. I mean, I have
Cool,
other
cool.
like self-published stuff that I've done, and autobiographical stuff. Actually, the a book that I worked on for the last 15 years with my collaborator Doug Latino, which is a collection of autobiographical short stories, mostly in a humorous vein, kind of in the Harvey P. Carr American Splendor,
Hmm.
underground comics of the 60s and 70s vein. That book is out now. And then also along those lines, you know, I'll just hold this up to the camera.
Yes.
I just finished making this, which looks like a record, but it's not. It's
Love that.
actually a my music memoir graphic novel. I was in bands for about 20 years, and I moved to New York City in the mid 80s and hung out at CBGB's and was kind of a part of the downtown, or I shouldn't say a part of, I was a wannabe part of the sort of punk rock alternative music scene in that time. And so I
Hmm.
made a graphic novel about that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's a
Yeah,
little bit of everything.
I just jotted that title down because I want to check that out. I am the audience. What a great title.
Thank you. That's actually from an XTC song, sort of an obscure XTC song called I Am the Audience, but the title really relates to when I discovered punk rock. And punk rock, you know, the idea was that, well, anybody can do it.
Hmm.
All you have to do is have the ideas and the energy. And so to go from being in the audience to being up on stage was a relatively easy leap within that community, within that genre. It didn't mean you were going to be good. It didn't mean you were going to get famous, but you could sort of make that initial leap and have that experience. So that's where the title comes from.
Love it, love it. Well, I am curious, kind of an origins question of how you got here. What captivates you about comics and sort of the why comics question?
Hmm, good question. Well, I loved comics ever since I guess I was about 10 years old when a lot of the old underground comics started showing up in my parents' room. My parents were hippies, and so there was a lot of countercultural stuff sitting around. And I remember seeing old Zap comics and other strange stuff that was coming into the house, along with reading the Sunday comics whenever I could get a hold of them. And then I had friends who introduced me to Marvel comics, and that was really it. Then I was hooked. And I mean, I've drawn ever since I was really little. My mom, when I was a baby, my mom would put ballpoint pens in my crib, and I would draw all over my sheets. So drawing has always been my number one favorite thing. And then when I discovered comics, I thought, wow, here's a thing you can do where you get to tell stories and maybe make people laugh. And you basically all you have to do is just draw constantly, all the
Yeah.
time, and you can do this. And I thought, well, that makes sense to me. So that's how I got into it. I had a long detour when I came to New York City to go to art school in the mid 80s, and I didn't really know what I was doing when I
Hmm.
chose the school that I went to, but I went to a school here in New York called Cooper Union, which is it's free, and that was the big advantage. It was free, and so it enabled me to move to New York City without spending a lot of money. But it was not very friendly to comics or illustration or really any kind of figurative work, especially work that had a narrative or a humorous element to it. So I kind of drifted away from comics and tried to be a fine artist, whatever that means, for
Hmm.
a while. And that didn't really work out so well for me. And then I fell in love with punk rock and wasted a good 10, 15 years trying to do that. And then when it was time for me to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life and figure out a way to earn a living, I knew that the one thing I was really good at was drawing. So I ended up in animation because I could paint realistically. And so I ended up as a background painter for a number of years and tried children's book illustration, had like some moderate success in that, illustrated a bunch of children's books and middle grade chapter books. And then somewhere along the line, I think I was almost 40 when I was just getting kind of bummed out about what was going on for me creatively. And my wife, who's also an artist, she's a sculptor, she was like, why don't you make a comic? You've always loved comics, and maybe the world of like cute, simple children's books is just not what you're cut out for. Maybe you need to make something weird and wild and crazy and have some fun for a change. So a couple of days later, I woke up with the idea for What's It.
Nice.
And I also met my friend Doug Latino, who was an autobiographical comics writer, and we started making comics together. So I kind of went off on those two tangents at the same time, working on my sci-fi horror humor graphic novel and doing autobiographical stuff with Doug. And good things started to happen. Far more, far more. I started having a lot more fun than I'd had in any of the other kinds of art worlds I'd tried to be a part of. I'll put it that way, and I felt like I was part of a community. I also got to meet my heroes. I mean, Rick Parker, the names,
Mm-hmm.
comic books that blew my mind as a 11-year-old. Suddenly I was meeting these people. And Dennis Kitchen, Bob Camp, Rick Parker, all these Chris Claremont. Like I was meeting these people, and I was like, oh my God, I'm home, is what it felt like, you know.
Love it.
And
Love it.
so I've been pretty happy ever since, and I've had some really good opportunities to make stuff.
That's awesome.
I think
That
I'm
is
going to
so
keep at
awesome.
it for as long
Yeah,
as I.
please do. Please do. Now, I know that you were talking about Lesser of the Lesser Gods, the punk rock connections, and I'm the audience. Love autobiography in comics, by the way. I love a good memoir comic. What are the sort of the story beats or the types of stories that get you energized about creating the most?
Hmm, that's a good question. I, I think that it's funny that we've been talking about autobio stuff, which I love, and I had a pretty weird upbringing. Like I grew up on a commune with no electricity or running water, and kind of had to find my way to an urban environment when I could. So I have some odd stories to tell. But the funny
Hmm.
thing is, I don't really enjoy drawing autobio stuff because it's so embedded in reality.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking about, well, like what do I like to draw? And I like to draw stuff that gives me a chance to hopefully be funny. And I like to draw stuff where I get to be imaginative and create the world. And so therefore, stories that aren't too rooted in reality are actually the most fun to draw. So it's kind of ironic that I've ended up doing so much, I guess, sort of realistic stuff. And even a book like What's It, which is which takes place half in another dimension, sort of a dystopian alien world, and then half of it takes place in the dystopian 1970s of Earth when I was a
Hmm.
teenager. And so half that book was really fun to draw. The other dimension part was really fun. Whereas the scenes that are taking place in this sort of dirtbag, semi-rural environment in the 1970s, those parts weren't as much fun to draw. I lived it. I didn't really want to go back to that, but it's what the story demanded. So, you got to draw what you got to draw. And one of the things that's really challenging about comics is that you can't take shortcuts. Whatever the story says is in the picture is what you have to draw. And that has led me to have a lot more respect, even for the cartoonists whose work I didn't like when I was a kid. When I would
Hmm.
pick up I'd get my stack of Marvel comics and I'd be like, oh no, not this artist, whatever. I certainly had my favorites, but now I have so much respect, even for the guys who I didn't like back then, because now I know how freaking hard it is
Right. Right.
to draw the entirety of a script. Like there's only so many scenes where you get to draw the people punching each other and doing all the cool action stuff. There's all that other stuff that you have to draw, and you have to make sure that whoever's in your story looks like who's ever in your story in every panel.
Hmm.
You understand how they're feeling. Um, I teach drawing at SVA, and like my main focus uh, for teaching drawing for cartoonists is teaching it from the point of view of like you have to turn your characters into actors. You have to make sure they're good actors. And so you have to understand anatomy and expression and all these things. And that is another, one of the really rigorous parts of drawing comics is drawing the same person over and over again, but giving them the specific pose and attitude and feeling that they're supposed to have according to the script, turning them into good actors. That was a bit of a
Wow.
tangent, but
No,
uh,
that's cool. That's
those are
awesome.
the things
Yeah.
I like to think about. Or when I get a script, those are the things I'm looking for. Like, is this going to be fun to draw? And how can I do a good job I sort of imagine myself as both the cinematographer and the director,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's like, can I can I make the characters into good actors? And can I tell the story in a way that's visually compelling? And if the script has some of that, then I'll be like, I'll be ready to go.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I know we mentioned MegaGhost, and I know there's also Marley's Ghost. Anything about those two particular titles, or any others that you'd like to dig into a little bit more?
Oh, well, thank you for asking about Marley's Ghost. That was a really incredible opportunity that I still can't believe came my way when I was pretty early on to getting back into making comics. I met Josh O'Neill, and through him I met Dennis Kitchen, and it just happened at that time that they were trying to bring back to life this long forgotten project that Harvey Kurtzman wanted to do in the 70s, which was to make a faithful comics adaptation of A Christmas Carol.
Yeah. Yeah.
basically to make a graphic novel, but that term didn't exist at the time. And
Hmm.
amazingly enough, Harvey Kurtzman himself couldn't find a publisher to do it.
Wow.
He drew a bunch of pages. He even got Jack Davis to do a couple of sample pages and still couldn't find a publisher. So it got stuck in a drawer and forgotten about. But Dennis Kitchen is closely involved with Kurtzman's estate, and he decided that he wanted to get this book made finally. And I got recommended to or suggested to be the artist for the book. And I still kind of can't believe that happened because um, in addition to the Marvel comics, probably the most influential thing on me as an artist, at least from the comics and illustration side, would have to be the artist for Mad,
Yeah. Yeah.
particularly Jack Davis and Mort Drucker.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I honestly believe that Mort Drucker, both of them, but Mort Drucker specifically, is probably one of the 10 greatest artists of all time. Just in terms of pure drawing ability and the ability to draw anything completely accurately and still make it hilarious at the same time. So anyway,
Mm.
that's a bit of an aside. Again, I got the opportunity to draw this book, and it was published in 2018 or maybe 2017, and it won an Eisner for Best Digital Comic. And then it just, some weird things happened and it never got printed. It
Mm.
basically only existed digitally for a long time. And for an old guy like me, and I think also for people old enough to really care about Kurtzman and his legacy, if something isn't in print, it's kind of hard to feel like it exists. So
Yeah.
5 years later, finally, this really great small up and coming publisher called Blaze came along, and they worked out a deal with Comixology, who was the original publisher, to finally make a print edition. And I'm thrilled that it's finally going to be out this fall, before Christmas, and it's a Christmas book. So I'm thrilled about that. And that was, like I said, just an incredible project to work on. It was scary as hell to work on because I'm basically having to literally follow in Kurtzman's footsteps,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
that was scary. But I did my best, and I think it came out okay.
Love it. Anything that you want to share about MegaGhost?
Oh, okay. So, well, Mega Ghost is the brainchild of mad genius Gabe Soria. He's the writer, and it's his concept, which I believe he had percolating for many years, and he was going to work on it with Mike Cavallero, who is a pretty well-known graphic novelist, and a longtime friend of mine. He and I worked in animation together for years. And Mike got so busy with his own books that he pawned me off on Gabe, which was great. And I've had a lot of fun working with Gabe. We did a series of single issues a couple years ago for Eric Powell's Albatross Funny Books imprint, and then we made it into a graphic novel, which came out during the pandemic, and like a lot of things, disappeared as a result at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So fortunately, Dark Horse is re-releasing it with a new cover and a couple of extra stories and new pages on the inside. And I'm excited about that. That I believe is gonna come out in January. We were hoping for a Halloween release because that would be perfect for the book, but January is fine too. And then next year we'll have a series of new issues followed by another graphic novel later next year. And Mega Ghost is probably the most kid-friendly, lighthearted, but still kind of creepy thing that I've worked on up to this point. It's kind of like 1/3 Saturday morning cartoon show, 1/3 EC horror comic, and 1/3 kind of like an imaginary storyboard for like the ultimate kaiju TV show.
Nice.
Big
Nice.
robots and monsters just battling it out. over the rooftops of the city. It's super fun to draw. And Gabe's a great writer. He just knows how to tell a story, how to pack a whole epic story into 23 pages. So yeah, that's MegaGhost.
Love it. Yeah. Uh, Glad to hear that that's out. Glad to hear that that'll be in print. Yeah, that's very cool. And I just appreciate the adaptation. We talked a little bit about autobiography, but when you can bring something from one form to another and do it in comics, I'm always interested in how that comes together.
Yeah, well, my friend Josh O'Neill, who he runs Beehive Books, which is this great little artisanal publishing house in Philadelphia. He used to own a comic book store in Philadelphia. He and I and Shannon Wheeler, also of Too Much Coffee Man fame,
Hmm.
we basically took the original text of A Christmas Carol and had to distill it down into a comics manuscript, and
Yeah.
we had to let the pictures tell a lot of the story, but at the same time, we wanted to remain true to Dickens and make sure we at least used as many of his best lines as possible. And of course, there's a lot of great lines in it and iconic lines. So it was really fun putting that together, both reading the original book and also watching all the different movie and TV adaptations of the show and
Hmm.
figuring out the different ways they tried to solve some of the inconsistencies in the story. Because there actually are a lot of loose ends in the book. When he wrote the book, he was writing it pretty quickly and it was being serialized.
Hmm.
And so it's not a perfect story the way that some other Dickens texts are. And what we started to realize from watching all the movies and seeing all the different things that they tried to do, the ways that they veered away from the text, we were like, oh, they're trying to solve these problems. So we got to pick and choose from all those different versions, which was fun.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool. Well, I think I have one more official question, and then perhaps an additional invitation. Um, Curious about, of course, where people can go if they want to find out more about your work, if they want to check out the work that's on the way or the work that's already out in the world.
Sure. Well, I mean, I have my website, which is GideonKendall.com, and I'm still on Instagram. A lot of my friends are trying to find some other alternatives for to the social media thing. I am now on Kara, that no AI platform, but I
Hmm.
haven't really gotten myself going over there yet. But I'm there and I'll try to start moving over there. But for now, I'm on Instagram and I'm easy to find. It's just my name at Gideon Kendall. One of the advantages of having kind of a strange name is that I don't have to do a lot of doctoring to get my
Sure, sure.
internet handles going. And then, you can find me at shows. I'm going to be tabling at SPX in September, and I'll be in Artist Alley at New York Comic Con as usual in October, and probably Mice in Boston. And I'm hoping that I'll have maybe some other opportunities as we rev up to promote Marley's Ghost as much as possible before the holidays. My website does have a store where you can buy most of the stuff that I have.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you, Gideon, for the time, the
Thank you.
conversation. So glad we connected.